Ladies and gentlemen, it is a real honor and a pleasure to be here with Etienne Davignon, President of CSR Europe, to welcome you to the European SDG Summit 2021. I will be your moderator for the day, and I will be joined a little bit later by Jens Schmidt-Burgel from Moody's, who will moderate the panel discussion, but also he will provide you with some premier information about the first European barometer on sustainable industry. As you can see, the agenda is very, very packed, and I hope you will stay with me and Jens to respect the timing. Before we start, some practical informations regarding how to make full use of the summit and this session. Just technically, I have some echoes. Okay, it's okay on your side. Okay, is this going better? Yes. So just some practical informations. Please make sure that you connect to the live discussion function, and then you will see popping up some other functionalities like the classic chats, but also you can raise directly questions to the speakers. You can also, as you can see, have a special connection with the speakers for you to have one-to-ones if you want to make appointments. And last but not least, you can also use the networking function. Don't miss, I would say, after this plenary, but also maybe after other sessions you will attend in the summit, the CSR Europe shop. It's called the CSR Toolbox, where you can then have one-to-one exchanges or calls with colleagues from CSR Europe, but also to look at what are some of the latest programs and tools and initiatives that we have to help you advance sustainability in your organization. Now, this summit is taking place the day right after the youth march that took place yesterday in Brussels, and which was again very, very impressive. It is also happening during a very busy week. More than 30 major events are taking place this week. Are they organized by the EU institutions or by civil society or industry? We will, in a few days, entering the Green Week. So that's another perspective of interesting analysis and maybe actions that will be shared. And of course, we are at the eve of the COP26 in 2 weeks' time. Now, with our summit, there will be more than 30 sessions, 250 speakers, 5,000 attendees are expected to be in this summit. And for us, the success of this summit will be measured against, I would say, the level of increase of our joint responsibility to transform, but also our duty to collaborate. Etienne Davignon, it's a pleasure to be here with you. This summit is also special. It marks CSR Europe's 25th anniversary. So my question is very simple. How do you feel to be the president of a 25 years young organization? How much are we ready, Europe and its entrepreneurs, to take action for climate and just transition? And if not, what is needed? Etienne, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. For an old man like me, 25 years means nothing. So it's a beginning, and we are full of life, and very grateful to everybody who's helped us over the years and continues to do this. The aim is very simple, is to explain, to have the dialogue, which leads to an action, and action only means something if it has a collective nature. We are, of course, obviously, and it is common sense, in favor of a green and social deal. Both things go together and have to go together if we want to be successful and leave a mark. So the social dialogue is as necessary as it was 40 years ago when Jacques Delors, as president of the Commission, launched the ideas of challenging business on questions which relate to society. So I'm looking forward to listen to the contributions, and I'm very optimistic over the fact that we will achieve results and, as usual, be happy about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Etienne. Thank you very much. And it's my pleasure now to have the three high-level speakers to set the tone of this summit, which is all about climate action and a just transition, what you just called, Etienne, a green and social deal. So we will have with us Francesco Starace, Frans Timmermans, and also Alistair Domer. First, maybe with Francesco Starace, you are the Chief Executive Officer and General Manager of Enel. We know from the many colleagues we're working with in Enel, you are seen as the architect of the deep transformation which Enel is undergoing. You also have strong positions and still have strong positions, is it in the B20 or in the World Economic Forum? And you have been very close to Ban Ki-moon and Antonio Guterres with regard to your functions at the United Nations Global Compact. So last but not least, and there's a link between you, Francesco, and Frans Timmermans. You have been one of the 30 leaders of civil society that was active in the European SDG platform that was chaired by Frans Timmermans. And when Frans was looking at the end results, he qualified the results of the platform as a miracle. And that is where you are closely connected. So thanks to be with us and also to set the tone of this very special summit. Francesco, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jan. It's an honor to be here. Greetings, Monsieur d'Avignon.
And you are muted, I think.
No, okay. Can you hear me now?
No, sorry.
Okay. So thank you again, Jan, to be here with you, and greetings, President Avignon. It's a pleasure to be here. And indeed, you're right. It was a little bit of a miracle that the platform at that time took off the way it did. And let's remember, this was another commission, and it was way before COVID-19. So it's another world that we're talking about. And I have to say that the evolution of this theme in Europe has been somehow miraculous. I remember when CSR Europe started the CEO Call for Action in May 2019. So again, another before COVID moment. We were able to gather more than 380 CEOs around this initiative. 24 of the various European countries signed up. So this was a very good start, let me say. And it is a testimony that the theme of a sustainable development in Europe was already there before this pandemic crisis hit. Then the new commission arrived and the European Green Deal was launched, again, while at the very beginning of the commission story. And it was, I would say, reinforced when the pandemic struck. So you can look at it in two phases, before and after. And the before moment demonstrated that the theme was deeply felt within Europe already. It was clearly an indication that we had to act on the climate front, and we had to act in a sustainable manner, so without destroying but generating value. And this has been then intertwined with a theme that emerged during and then right after the COVID-19, so with the need to relaunch the economies of Europe using the Green Deal as a key lever for industrial transformation and development of this huge part of the world. We think that the Fit for 55 package that the Commission set in the discussion now, and it's going through the development on the Parliament and then Council discussions, is a very good step, and it is a sustainable one. And we believe that the transformation that companies have to go through in order for this industry to be fit for the next generation and to bring development in Europe in a sustainable way can be carried out in a sustainable manner. That means without creating what typically transformation creates. Let's face it, transitions, in particular industrial transitions, have always brought about inequality in the past. There are many examples, we don't have time to go through them, but if you reflect on what happened with any industrial transformation and industrial transition, you see that it has created a rift between those that understand the dynamics of the transition, those that see them before others, and that push them and benefit from them, and those that don't see this transition happening, or even if they see it, they try to ignore it or stop it. And this is the beginning of an inequality, because the formers typically benefit and the latters typically lose from the transformation. So we have to make sure that this doesn't happen this time. And I think this initiative is key in order to reduce the risk of creating inequalities, but actually put together everybody in the benefits that this transformation can carry out. So if you look at what we have been doing to ourselves as a company, we are an example that the transformation can generate value, can be carried out in a just way, and also that this can trigger additional transformation along the value chain. We are now embarked in a very large supplier development program that takes into account the whole value chain of the thousands of our suppliers and contractors in order for them to understand what this transformation, what this transition brings about for them and how they can benefit from it, acting early and becoming more involved in circular business development models in additional sustainable initiatives. So in all this, I think Europe has put forward good tools. And I think I have to say Frans Timmermans was in a way prophetic when even in the previous commission, he fought for this. That means not just the environmental dimension of this transformation, so decarbonizing and electrifying our energy mix, which is clearly a value for Europe, and the recent development of gas prices show how this is important going forward, but also coupling that with attention to those that stand to lose from the transformation and put the just transition theme together with the evolution of the energy systems and in general the industrial system of Europe in context. And the just transition funds, those money that are set aside to make sure that this transformation is not resisted, but is actually embraced as much possible by the various sectors of the industry in Europe, is so important. And I think the new Commission has put this as a cornerstone of the relaunch after the COVID-19. In general, we think that the COVID-19 crisis has demonstrated how dependent and how interconnected our economies and in general our societies are. Can we work in isolation? No, we cannot anymore. This is affecting supply chains, which are now being redesigned and stressed by the present pandemic. They not only take into account supply chain, but also take into account the politics and the governance of, in general, health in our society. How interconnected are we? How can we now demonstrate that we can work in isolation? It's impossible. So in that sense, I think this is an incredible opportunity we have. The reason why we are constantly surprised, like you said, why these themes are so deeply felt, and how is it possible to gather a consensus so quickly around this? It was considered a miracle now before, but we should understand that this is a theme that people understand deeply. We were surprised by the fact when we started shutting down our own power plants and substituting them with renewable energy, that the people in the floor in our power plants knew this was going to happen way before management understood it. So this transformation is felt more than understood by people. And we should stop being surprised by this, and we should just accompany this big change, making sure that the part of population that has something to lose does not feel it, but gets to understand what the benefit for them can be. And I think that's the new thing that Europe is bringing this time to the theme. Nowhere else in the world this is felt and understood as well as it is today in Europe. We should be proud of this, and we should really pay attention to this kind of music that Europe is trying to play around the world. So thank you for this opportunity for the address, and thank you again for all the efforts that you are putting into this important dimension.
Thank you, Francesco, and thank you for cette énergie inépuisable that you have, because I can testify that we in the teams here at CSR Europe, we have this energy through your colleagues also coming over to us when we collaborate. So thank you very much for that. And I think there was not better introduction than what the words that you have been expressing for Frans Timmermans. Frans Timmermans, it was said by Francesco, you are Mr. Green Deal, and not only in Brussels and in all European countries, but also in Washington, in Beijing, and all the other capitals around the world. What people might know less is that you are also the author of a number of books, including Fraternité, Brotherhood, Reweaving Our Ties. And indeed, the word was used by Francesco. It's quite prophetic when you read your book. And it's bringing you very close to Jacques Delors, who 25 years ago was calling already women and men in business to act against social exclusion, against the inequalities that he was seeing happening and coming. So this call of Jacques Delors was responded by Etienne Davignon with 10 other business leaders. And after 25 years now, 10,000 enterprises are united around CSR Europe. Etienne was also referring at the very start of this plenary, calling for a European societal dialogue next to the social dialogue that was said 40 years ago, and especially to ensure that all intelligences of civil society can support and the green and the social deal. We are very, very happy to have you. I know that right after your speech you have to go, but I know that Etienne is willing to express a few words after your speech. Hans, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jan. And well, being called a prophet is always a very dangerous thing. But fortunately, I'm one of many, and everyone on this call saw this coming a long time ago. And Stevie was very active long time ago, understanding how deep the societal changes are that we will be faced with, and how deep the challenges that we are faced with. Thank you for inviting me to be at this opening of the summit today. We are just starting. This is going to, as Francesco just said, this is going to be a fundamental reshaping of our economies and societies. And we need to understand that all of us need to be part of a profound change. And as Francesco said, and I can't stress this enough, this is something humanity's gone through earlier, but never at this speed, never at this scale. and never with the risk of this becoming an existential challenge, because we need to learn to live within planetary boundaries, and we need to do it at an incredibly high speed. So any change is going to lead to poverty if we're not careful. Any change, by definition, as Francesco said, leads to winners and losers. Every industrial revolution so far has demonstrated this. Now, the big difference now is that we are in a position as global community to avoid the pitfalls of earlier industrial revolutions. We could make sure that we leave no one behind, but it will take a tremendous effort. And you know, after 25 years, CSR Europe, and especially also Stevie in his role of mobilizing businesses, you are in an ideal position to keep mobilizing businesses, some of whom don't understand what's happening. Most do, if not all, and some, whilst understanding it, would rather not embrace it because they don't really see a position for themselves in this transformation. And I believe, like with citizens, individual citizens in society, also businesses should be helped to understand that there is a place for them in what's coming, that there are opportunities for them to transform themselves, to look for new roles, look for new opportunities. Now, we've always used the 17 Sustainable Development Goals as our compass, and that should stay the case. But we also know that today, it's the climate crisis, and to a lesser degree, but that will change soon, I'm afraid, the threatening ecocide that are determining the global agenda. And they are becoming a brand. And I don't mind this. I don't mind this at all. I think under this threatening crisis, there is a solution that depends on the SDGs. So I wouldn't see this as a competition, but rather as a reinforcing dynamic that we see now. Now, COP26 is only a couple of weeks away, and for a long time, it didn't look that good that we would be able to really have a couple of breakthroughs there. I'm quite encouraged by what I've seen in Milan at the pre-COP, but also in the last couple of weeks, the announcements of major players in the world's economy that they will go for carbon neutrality by the middle of the century. The announcements almost on a daily basis. You know, what the Emirates did last week. Turkey ratifying the Paris Agreement is not a small thing. It's very important. Korea now announcing 40% reduction of emissions in an economy that's relatively young. That's quite bold and courageous. So I think Europe leading the way with climate neutrality in 2050 and a reduction of at least 55% of our greenhouse gas emissions as compared to 1990 by 2030, which is 8.5 years or a little more than 8 years away, is a huge ambition, but it can be done. It can be done. And I think we need to step up in several areas, especially, and that will concern most of you, especially stepping up our efforts to make the circular economy happen quicker, so that we make sure that the products we put on the market are sustainable, that we do protect biodiversity in our supply chains and production processes. We need to set targets to make sure that happens. And to foster a responsible and sustainable corporate behavior, we'll also need to look at corporate governance rules and due diligence along value chains. Voluntary actions such as yours have really made possible a change of mindset in the corporate world, which I think, 2 decades ago would have been unimaginable. And you came up with it. And I really need to pay tribute to you for that. But if we want to truly change the way the economic system works and ensure a level playing field, this also needs to be reflected into rules, we need to provide long-term predictability. That's the government's task. We need to provide also the right frameworks within which good behavior is stimulated and frankly bad behavior is sanctioned. I think I welcome the fact that now we have a real dialogue and real decisions in the OECD on minimum corporate tax. And I also welcome this movement, which I see across the business world, where sustainability is put at the heart of business strategies. Asking companies to consider their impacts on society and on the planet is not naive, and it's not sort of idealistic. It is good business to look into that direction. Environmental, social, and governance risks will impact companies' performance. And this is happening at an increasing speed. And I believe most companies, Francesco is one of the leaders in this area, but most companies now have to come to terms with that. There are so many new opportunities, in renewable energy, in building renovation, in integrated infrastructures, in completely new transport systems, and batteries, and hydrogen, in digital. What we need to do on the level of space technology, circular applications. So moving towards a sustainable economic model enabled by digital and clean technologies will make Europe a full front runner globally. So if we apply the right tools and the right policies, we can turn sustainability in an advantage. It's not a cost, but it's an asset. It's an advantage that will create better competitive positions for European companies at a global level. But I also want to underline the scale of the social challenges. Francesco said about it, and I know Stevie is always on about this, and he's absolutely right. The transition will affect everyone, but some regions will be more affected than others. I myself come from a former coal mining region. We did not, in the Netherlands, 50 years ago, get the just transition right. There was transition. My region lost 75,000 jobs. There was also investment, but sadly, most of it not in my region. And if we want the just transition to work, it has to work in the regions that will need to get out of the coal mining sector, which is happening anyway. But we can now invest in them. We can use their advantages, the strong infrastructure they have, the workforce that will be needed. Because the one thing that I think is encouraging is today, the risk of mass unemployment is not there unless we don't skill and reskill our population. Then there is a risk of mass employment, because then companies will have to look elsewhere outside of Europe for skilled workforce. But if we are able enough, together with the private sector, but especially also as an extra effort of public authorities, to give people the skills they will need in the new economy, we will have 2 million extra jobs in Europe. Of course, other jobs will disappear in the coal mining industry and some other industries, but new jobs will reappear. I think the automotive industry is a case in point. Of course, the transitional transactions are complicated and huge, but if I understand the CEOs correctly in that industry, they're saying to me, we will need the workforce we have now also in the future of the car industry, albeit in slightly different jobs, but not less paying jobs, but with different skills, and we need to skill and reskill our workforce. So if we put social justice at the heart of the Green Deal, is what we've done, I would say you should also fully integrate fairness concerns into every action you undertake. This means looking at poverty, inequality, individual rights, reskilling and upskilling. In other words, the human side. To build a sustainable future, we need to put people and planet first, not just for moral reasons. The moral reason should be reason enough, but simply also for practical reasons, because if people feel disengaged, they will fall for the anti-scientific rhetoric of those who want to disrupt and destroy. They will fall for the fake arguments of those who want to come to power by destroying the system as it is and not reform the system. System can't stay what it is, but it doesn't need revolution. It needs reform, and it needs the participation of everyone in society. And this is, I believe, my friends, what we are responsible for. This is what needs to happen. With your help, it can. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Frans. And Etienne, please.
Frans is always just round the ball and indicating that what the risks are, what the opportunities are, and all the reasons for which we should not be scared. I think the opportunities are enormous. And I think we have something in politics that we have not had for, I don't know, maybe decades, is that we have the young people with us. The people of the generation of tomorrow are those who want to see action today. And I think that is, in political terms, in social terms, enormously important. And I think we have to accept that there will be winners and losers, but at the same time, we have to commit to help those who will suffer and not simply promote those who will win. And I think that is very much in your mind. And I think it is something that has to be monitored closely and something in which the accompanying measures have to be taken. The situation is not the same in the totality of the 27 countries of the Union. And we have to be able to diversify and to act where it is needed. And that, I think, is always complicated when one calls on solidarity, which means that not everybody will get the same advantages. But I think we can count on you, and we will certainly continue in our dialogue with business, and business understands that the risks are there, but the risks are unavoidable, and so the opportunities must be the name of the game. Thank you, Frans, and good luck.
Thank you, Frans. Thank you very, very much. Now, for setting the tone, we have a third leader, and this is Alistair Dormer. He's Executive Vice President of Hitachi, and a company that you joined in 2003 when you were asked to establish the Hitachi's rail business in Europe. And since a couple of months, since April 2021, you are the Chief Environmental Officer in charge of the environmental strategy for Hitachi at a global level. So not very much a coincidence that today you are also the principal partner of the COP26, which Frans Timmermans was already referring to, including some of the headlines regarding some new commitments that have already been announced. Alistair, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak today. I mean, some people think, well, you know, why is Hitachi involved in this important mission? Well, I mean, Hitachi's strapline for many years has been contribute to society through the creation of superior and original products. And our strategy has been to be a global leader in social innovation. Well, you know, the biggest challenge we're faced as a planet is climate change and the issues that we are facing and we're discussing today. And then when I looked at, you know, Hitachi's portfolio of activity, we have a significant railway business based in, headquartered in Europe. We have a significant energy business, Hitachi ABB Power Grids, which is headquartered in Europe, which is working very hard in terms of connectivity, power stations, connecting wind farms. So we have a major role to play. We have an industry business and we have a huge digital business. So all of that really, to me, became the purpose of what Hitachi should be doing. And I think, as the previous speakers were saying, you know, SDGs and our social responsibility becomes an absolutely key part of our business strategy. Because if you don't do that, you won't survive, is our key takeaway from that. So now, you know, we've signed up to the UN's Race to Zero campaign. We're looking forward to COP26, but we know that we need to do more. And I think COP26 is a very, very important event for governments and leaders to get together and make these agreements. And I am optimistic that we will make progress. But from an industrial point of view, I'm also keen that that is a great event for us as industry partners to work together with other players in the industry, our customers, our supply chain, governments, cities, municipalities. It is a great bringing together of a community to see what more can we do to make this a success. And you know, COP26 is probably the sort of the biggest event of the year, but the second biggest event of the year was the Tokyo Olympics during a pandemic. And a lot of people had a lot of concerns about the Olympics. Is it the right thing to do? Should we be doing it? But looking to see how that galvanized communities and how people came together to celebrate success and to make history was absolutely fantastic, especially the young people's events, you know, the events like skateboarding, where the competitors were congratulating each other with the real spirit of youth, was really heartwarming. And now we're seeing the youth, as was mentioned earlier, really engaged in, you know, this great challenge we have to overcome the problems that we've got in terms of climate change. I think we must bring the youth of today with us, or they will push us very, very hard in order to achieve that. But, you know, just thinking about the Olympics, it's not just that 10 seconds of a race or whatever the activity is. There's a huge amount of effort that goes in. The planning, the training, the collaboration, and the team that's behind that performance. I think, you know, that is very much the same with the challenge we face. We must work together. I think the European Union are central to how we move things together. I mean, we've seen the recent IPCC report make some pretty sobering warnings. You know, we're close to the tipping point. Human activity is driving extreme weather. We're set to pass 1.5 degrees C by 2040. I mean, you know, there's really no time to waste. So we need climate change innovation. And it's actually, we need to lead by example. I mean, Japan is a little bit behind the European Union in doing this, but we're working with all of our supply chain, thousands and thousands of supply chain with our new sustainable procurement guidelines. One of the major commitments is to achieve carbon neutrality, I mean, across all of our businesses by 2030 and then through the entire value chain by 2050. I mean, these are commitments that we take very, very seriously. But to achieve that goal, we're working really, really hard within our own operations. I say to the CEOs of our businesses, this is not about adding cost. This is about making investments now to reduce our energy consumption in the future and switch our energy consumption to renewable energy sources. And once CEOs start to see changes and savings, then this will accelerate even more. And the increase in the application of technology to make this change is extremely important for us. And we have a huge impact in our Scope 3 emissions for all the products and services we put out there. We must reduce the CO2 emissions of those products and services. And if we don't, we won't survive as a business, because people will not wish to buy products and services which are creating harmful emissions to the planet. So to me, it's a very, very simple business strategy. Decarbonize ourselves for our own credibility, and then help governments, cities, industry to decarbonize. Otherwise, we will not be around as a business. We're doing a lot in this area already. We're working with, we have an automotive business, Hitachi working heavily on EV. We're working on EV infrastructure with our electric business, but also working with partners such as Shenzhen Bus Company, one of the largest new energy public transportation groups in the world, to help European bus operators municipalities deliver their electric bus requirements, because it's not as simple as just replacing a bus that was diesel with electric. There's a lot of constraints around that in terms of whether that's range or charging capacity or the grid. We've developed all of the software to manage those very, very difficult constraints, working with Shenzhen, teaming up with companies like Arrival, electric vehicle manufacturers. So these are some of the exciting things that we're doing. I mentioned energy. We're doing a lot of connectivity with energy, HVDC connections between wind farms and onshore. But increasingly in the future, we're going to have to do more, because somewhere in Europe, the sun is shining and the wind is blowing at all times. The issue is that how do we get that energy to all of the 27 nations? And that is something that we really need to see more. And the Green Deal is there to protect people and citizens, the most vulnerable in this transaction, which is a very, very, very key, in this transition. It's very, very key that we find a balance between social cohesion, economic prosperity, and the environment. And finance will play, such a key role in all of that. So, now our message today and our message at COP26 will be, it's our responsibility as society to accelerate the race to zero. We must encourage, motivate, and support all of our partners to do the same. And we really want to engage with governments and with industrial partners and the key policymakers to see what we can do to help that work. So, co-creation is the important thing for technology. And I firmly believe that we can step up to the challenge, because the prize at stake for climate change innovation, is truly the greatest prize of all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Alistair, very much. Wow, this is putting, I think, a great challenge also to the next panel that will now follow. I take from your messages, and this is an existential question for companies to survive. We must bring youth with us. This is about giving an equal ambition to social cohesion, and it's about sector and cross-sector collaboration, even co-creation, as you named it. I'm very pleased to have now Jens Schmidt-Burgel from Moody's. You are the Managing Director, Regional Head of EU27, but you're also a member of the board of CSR Europe. And we are very, very proud to have you, because when, as Mr. Starach said, we launched the 380 CEO call, where Mr. Starach, but also Ilham Kadri and others have been working on very, very hard. It went also together with a big action, the European Pact for Sustainable Industry. And that is where you proposed to equip the Pact for Sustainable Industry with a reference barometer to pulse and to measure what is the level of maturity in industry sectors and also in industry federations. So Jens, thank you very much for that initiative. I'm happy to give you now the floor to moderate the panel, but also to introduce us to the barometer and some of its results. Jens?
Thank you. Thank you, Jan. Thank you for those kind words, and also a warm welcome from Moody's. We're very proud to be sponsor of the SDG Summit, and we're very proud that we had the opportunity to work together with CSR Europe on this exciting project. As we've heard from the previous distinguished speakers, I think it's quite clear that we are at a turning point in Europe and globally, and we need to take action now. But what we also need is an independent source to measure how is action taking place and where are we on the way to decarbonization, to carbon neutrality. So what is happening? So for that purpose, we've basically come up with the Sustainable Industry Barometer in cooperation with CSR Europe. And the intention is really assessing the maturity and integration of sustainability factors in European industry federations. So the first slide you see here is that we see an increase in controversies on biodiversity and on climate change, a sharp increase over the last 2 years. That is also partially in connection with the pandemic, but nevertheless, the topic becomes more and more important. So that's one of the findings one of the observations that we saw in this research report. Next slide, please. The other thing that is most important that we saw is on the energy transition. I think we see a fragmentation between the sector leaders and the sector laggards. And I think the key challenge going forward will be to close the gap and basically take all companies in the various industries along that path and really close the gap between the leaders and the laggards going forward. Next slide, please. So we can move on to the next one in order to save some time and have a little bit more. So key findings. This is a really important message. So what have we seen? We really have seen 100% of the federations that we surveyed, sustainability embedded within the mission and vision statements of those associations. So that's a set target. So everybody is online with that one. However, what we also found is that engaging in impact-driven collaboration projects, only 30% of the federations, or time-bound targets, including a roadmap, only 40%, and provision on annual sustainability is only 50%. So we all can see from the report that there's still a lot of work to be done, and that needs to be done. And I think that's the key thing for this report, which we hopefully intend to publish on a more regular basis in order to see progress going forward. We need to make progress as a group, as a collective team, and the industry federation together with the member sort of institutions to move these things forward. And can I have the next slide, please? So what are the 6 recommendations from a CSR Europe perspective? First of all, the top CEOs need to rally together on purpose and systematic change. The industry federation must embed the SDGs. And the industry federation should set clear targets. What they also need to do is continue with research and education, increase the intra and cross-sector collaboration for impact, and publish an annual sustainability report. So I think those are the action points that everybody needs to look at, and within their federations, move things forward over the coming years in order to move to the target that we've all set ourselves. We all know those are ambitious targets. We all know that we need these are stretch goals, but I think the previous speakers have clearly said there is a willingness and a chance now to move things forward. And I think speaking from a German perspective, as you're probably all aware, we are currently in intense discussions sort of about the new government, and that government might bring the change also. And I hope that it will act as a motor for Europe to drive this agenda forward over the coming years. So with that, let me finish here on the barometer and let me invite my panelists and let me sort of start with the discussions that we wanted to carry out to give you a perspective from various sort of industry and association leaders across the continent. So maybe let me turn to Ms. Borrow first, Secretary General of the ITUC. In the context of the role trade unions in Europe play in reaching the goals set by the EU Green Deal and the UN SDGs, which is the most pressing objectives for companies to collaborate on? Ms. Borrow?
Well, all of these things are, of course, very critical. And but if you actually look at the oppressive, the terribly dehumanizing exploitation of supply chains for too many workers around the world, the basis on which we make our profits for the global MNEs, then that must be turned around. At the European level, mandated due diligence will help with that enormously, because companies will have to do the due diligence, analyse the risk of exploitation. The ITUC's Global Rights Index shows you clearly which countries are in a situation where their laws don't respect rights. So anybody from 3 to 5 on our global index is going to be a risk. And of course, there'll be, from time to time, risks in other areas, even where the regulations are good. But it's really taking on board the role of responsibility, the role of grievance to actually remedy these areas of exploitation. And of course, you can't marry mandates around due diligence on rights without mandates around due diligence on the environment. we've worked with many companies, but I was struck by Francisco again, indicating indeed that it takes deep commitment to transform your company, and indeed you have to work with workers. They know what's happening on the ground. You have to build their trust. You have to engage them in the speed and the transition that Frans Timmermans talked about. And of course, I heard that from others as well. But unless we have the social dialogue for which Europe is known, unless it's valued, that bargaining and agreement around just transition measures are met, that the rules of decent work are in place everywhere, then indeed we won't have justice in terms of the priority I picked out, but we won't have justice in terms of women's participation or indeed wages either. Can I just tell you that in regard to women, some 800 billion was lost from the economy during the pandemic by the loss of jobs and income for women. That's about the combined GDP of 98 nations. Think about that impact, and also think about how much we could add to the global economy if we really dealt with gender equity. I think it's around 13 trillion. That will give us a lot of income if we get the tax base, the rules of the game right, to put into the challenges of climate and indeed of the social and environmental taxonomy that we'll talk about shortly in regard to investment, challenges us to all be part of.
Thank you, Ms. Buron. Maybe let's turn to Ms. Chavariat, Executive Director, Institute for Environmental Policies. What is the role of Industry 5.0 in terms of a more sustainable, resilient, and human-centric industry? Ms. Chavariat?
Thank you, Jens. Well, Industry 5.0 is where we need to get to. We're busy implementing Industry 4.0, but it's time to take the next leap and to see Industry 5.0 as the source of future competitiveness for Europe that allows us to live well within the limits of the planet. And it means putting people at the center, as Sharon said, health, well-being, social inclusion, but also thinking of technologies that do not substitute human capabilities, but rather complement them. We need to start using our best assets in Europe, which are people, and we need to stop rewarding pollution. The second element is net zero sustainability. We're talking about a transformation that eliminates the use of fossil fuel, don't reduce, eliminate. We are talking about a drastic reduction of our material footprint. By 2050, according to scientific evidence that is available to date, we need to reduce per capita material footprint in Europe. That is everything you and I consume in terms of its footprint, between half and 2/3. So I think in terms of material consumption, we are not there yet in terms of having done our mental shift. And the third big element is about regenerating natural capital, not just preventing an ecocide, but it's actually regenerating natural capital, because we will need that natural capital to feed ourselves, to have high quality water, but also to adapt to climate change. And the third principle for Industry 5.0 is strategic autonomy, but not a strategic autonomy which is about capturing resources beyond our fair share, because SDGs is about everyone getting there. So therefore, we need to look at strategic autonomy in a collaborative way as a peace and security building mechanism. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chavariat. And maybe turning back to Ms. Burrow, sort of, what is the role of tax transparency in reaching a climate neutral and inclusive Europe by 2050?
Transparency and the elimination of tax evasion means everything. If we're going to reinvest in the areas of resilience that's so clearly not working for everybody today, so invest in health, in education, in care more generally, aged care, childcare, but also if we're to invest in partnership with the private sector in enabling green infrastructure, in the energy transition, in the clean technologies for manufacturing, in the digitalization and servicing areas. We need to make sure the state has a proper tax base. And when indeed we don't have financial transparency because we've not yet eliminated tax havens, we don't have a beneficial beneficial register of ownership, and indeed we don't yet have the agreement, although we saw some progress at the OECD on Friday, to a minimum tax rate for corporations. It was a start, but I have to say the loopholes worry us. Of course, 15%, we think it could be higher. So we ask that people be, ambitious at the G20 around this. But if you think about what's already, in development, in indeed completion, the FSB disclosure rules around, climate and climate investments, very important. We're seeing more and more money go into the climate space, but a lot of it's greenwashing. Too much of it is greenwashing. And so we need the kind of framework of the European taxonomy and social environment and social taxonomies, which we think we hope will be ambitious to actually guide every unit of currency. You can't have a green and brown economy anymore. We're in a race against time, as Frans Timmermans said. We need every euro, dollar, unit of currency to be governed by an ESG lens. So we really need to repair our tax base. We really need it to be, again, more progressive. And we really need governments to be able to be genuine partners through social dialogue with workers, with employers, and for communities, with civil society, in how we finance a just and sustainable future.
Thank you, Ms. Burrow. Now, maybe for one final question to Ms. Chavriat, sort of how is it possible to enable condition and mechanism for competitive sustainability? I mean, we've already heard the challenges outlined by Ms. Burrow. I mean, I think it's quite a challenging thing, not just sort of trying to get carbon neutrality, but also move the people along, make sure that the industry is behaving in an appropriate form. So how can we make this sort of all happen?
Well, I think we need to put competition really at the service of sustainability. So the first thing, it's wonderful that companies have pledges. It's wonderful that they're setting long-term targets, but we need to see the math. Those need to be independently verified, and we need to have backcasting. If that is your goal in 2050, what are you doing over the next 5 years, over the next 10 years? Or otherwise, you don't have a credible pathway. The second thing is directionality of innovation. All technology in Europe must pass this litmus test of net zero sustainability, delivering for people and their well-being, and strategic autonomy. The third element is really using ratchet mechanism for standards. You start from the practices of frontrunner, and over time you are ratcheting your standards. So product policy will be key. We also have the review of the emissions directive, industrial emissions directive, the best available techniques. There are lots of different mechanisms that can be used to get that ratcheting over time. Fourth, really rewarding good practice. I hope investors will, once the taxonomy is out, reward good practice, right? We need to make sure polluter pays. Polluter still doesn't pay. If you look at the data, it's not there. Internalization of air pollution, water pollution, the polluter doesn't pay today. And we also need to make sure that we give extra points on green procurements for those who have good practices, that we ease administrative burden wherever it's possible. And we need to have more transparency to investors and the public. We need to see a ranking of companies within a sector so they can really compete with each other in a way that creates a virtuous circle. And last but not least, we need to strengthen industrial policies of member states. If you look at the indicators right now in the European semester, they're not indicators that allow you to track whether you have an industrial transformation. So that means new policies, making sure DG reform helps member states on that pathway, and pushing for greater coherence. Finance, assets, products, materials, value chains, trade, all of this needs to be coherent to allow competition to push us to the top. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chalverat. Now let's turn to industry. So let's speak to a CEO. Let's speak to Laurent Dartout, CEO of Bridgestone's in EMEA. Sort of, what is Bridgestone's most impactful initiative to accelerate sustainable mobility innovations through advanced technologies and solutions and make mobility easier, safer, smoother, and seamless, creating new value for society, customers, and partners? Mr. Dartout, the floor is yours.
Yes, first of all, I'm happy to be part of this program, as Bridgestone, like I think all other private corporations, has an enormous responsibility to act on climate and to act with urgency. So I was hearing earlier Frans Timmermans mention about sustainability not being a cost, but being an asset for companies and for society. I would fully echo that, but for that, we have to act now. So let me try and pinpoint a few examples of that. And be as concrete as I can to explain what we do at Bridgestone here, maybe starting with what we are known for, which is leading tire technology. So the first example is a new technology we have introduced called Enlighten. What it does, it reduces the weight of a tire by around 20%. So we use 20% less raw material. We also reduce rolling resistance, which means ultimately the fuel consumption and the CO2 emission by 30%. Another example is in the process of developing tires. We have developed a proprietary virtual tire development technology. It can therefore predict tire performance without having to do the physical driving that it once used to. So you can skip the 50,000 kilometer testing on, repeated many times. So as a result, during the development phase, 60% of the CO2 emission can be eliminated. So I think those are some very concrete contributions, but as you rightly mentioned before, innovation is also in the space of digital mobility solutions for Bridgestone. We have a company that we bought a couple of years ago called Webfleet Solution, and that's the leader in Europe in fleet management platform. It is fully digital and provide the fleets customers with real-time data and insights from data and artificial intelligence. What actually it helps do is, again, here reduce the fuel consumption and the CO2 by about 25% on average. It also has an active driver feedback alert system, which allows not only to keep on working on better driving behavior, but also avoids the harsh braking and the unsafe behavior on the road. And finally, the last aspect is in our operations and manufacturing. We have a quite significant footprint across Europe, and we have actually already achieved in 2021 our 2030 target to reduce CO2 emission by 50% versus our baseline that was set in 2011. And that's across all our European sites. We also are now powered by 100% renewable electricity across all our European sites. So I know it's, we always talk about long-term, and I think the previous speaker was mentioning that it's a long-term journey, but that's why we have set intermediate targets to make sure that we're in a position to contribute here and now, not only in 20 or 30 years' time, given the obvious urgency that we all know. So my message will be, we all need to have an agenda that helps us deliver in the short term while we keep working, of course, on continuing that agenda in the long term.
Thank you, Mr. Dartout. I think you clearly highlighted how important it is that we're also making incremental steps in the various industries, and that each small step matters in sort of improving the performance of your tires, which is a product I think that all of us will continue to use for the foreseeable future. Even in a decarbonized environment, I think the wheel will remain an important element, and it will likely to be sort of made out of rubber, as far as I'm concerned, probably. But let's have another question for you. The European Pact for Sustainable Industry has set a target for all European industry federations to have a mature and integrated strategy on sustainability by 2024. How do you value the role of your industry federation? And what do you see as the role for partnerships and cross-sector collaboration in general in helping achieve the EU Green Deal and the UN SDGs?
Yeah, to be clear, I don't see how we can deliver on a vision of sustainable mobility in the future in isolation as a standalone. It has to be done in partnership, both within the industry, but also across industry sectors. It is a matter of urgency, and it's more than time for cooperation based on what I see. So let me give you an example within our industry. We have introduced an innovative sustainable supply chain financing program, which was the first in the world to provide suppliers with financing based on their sustainability rating. So the better the ESG score, the more favorable the terms for the supplier, therefore driving sustainability throughout the supply chain. So that's the influencing role that I was mentioning a bit earlier companies can have in creating, therefore, a sort of win-win-win for the company, for the suppliers, and ultimately for society and the planet. Actually, if you are interested in this, my CFO, Astrid Ryan, will be giving a bit more detail on that in one of the upcoming keynotes on Thursday. But I mentioned also in industry relations is extremely important and has a big role to play. So we are actively working with the European Tire Trade Association to pull together the full automotive value chain into an innovative alliance. So as I said, we cannot do it alone. And it is not a matter of competitive advantage. You don't try to win by being sustainable. Sustainable is something that we have to do together. And the more we are, the faster we'll bring the benefit which are absolutely required and needed. So as I said, the future of mobility also relies on cross-industry partnership and innovation. Maybe a couple of examples here. We have a tire technology called Texin. It has been made possible by the partnership with Arlongseo and Solvay. We're going to hear from Ilham Kadri in a few minutes, but that cooperation was essential to reduce fuel consumptions and CO2 emission. Alone, we could have done only a small piece of the job. Another partnership with Microsoft. Here it's on the digital engineering part. I was mentioning earlier the virtual tire development technology that has been developed with them, but also on the mobility solution space. We have a world-first real-time tire damage monitoring system that we have developed jointly with Microsoft. So as you can see, this has multiple facets, and that's an effort that involves competitors, suppliers, but also collaboration with governments, institutions, and public sectors. And for me, that's the only way that we'll move at a pace which hopefully will be fast enough so that we can bring results to the world.
Thank you, Mr. Dartout. And I think this has also been highlighted by our research that it is essential for the industry federations to work together, to collaborate within their industry, and it is essential for all of us to achieve this target. So let's turn to one industry federation representative and also to an industry that maybe is not at the forefront of the sustainability debate, but also maybe Mr. Profumo can also sort of give us some insight. So turning to Alexandro Profumo, President of the Aerospace and Defense Industry Association in Europe and also COO of Leonardo. Mr. Profumo, as President of the Aerospace and Defense Industry Association of Europe, how is the sector moving towards sustainability, and to which extent do you think it is possible to engage more members of the industry sector on these topics? And what are the key messages that the industry would want to convey to EU policymakers about the new upcoming regulations? Mr. Profumo, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, Mr. Schmidt-Bruegel, for this invitation. Many thanks to the organizer. It's really an honor for me as a chairman of ASD. ASD is a very large association. Since we have aeronautics, as we know, we have as well commercial aeronautics, which is really involved in that, defense, security, and space. All the segments have something in common. They are high technology and strategic domains, enablers of the goals the European Union is setting for itself. in terms of just and green transition, as well as geostrategic role and strategic autonomy. We heard before of the concept of strategic autonomy. We are alongside governments and institutions, they keep technology providers for the security of European citizens, a prerequisite for prosperity as well as long-term peace, international cooperation, and economic and social development are some examples of that. The planes and helicopters we manufacture all over the industry support emergency medical services and first responders. Many of our companies have been directly involved in responding to COVID emergency in several states. We, as Leonardo in Italy, we have been incredibly involved in transportation of medical instruments and doctors. The equipment we develop allows European armed forces to monitor and protect European borders, territories and waters, and the security operational centers we run contribute every day to the protection from cyber threats of critical infrastructure that provide essential services to the citizen. In short, aerospace defense and security forms a diverse ecosystem that helps protect the life and way of life of European citizens. The aerospace and defense is also a global driver of innovation and technological solutions required to bring forth as an ecological transition capable to address global challenges as the achievement of the 2030 agenda. A clear example is offered by aeronautics. Aviation has been a driver and a symbol of globalization and of social and economic growth. And we are working to be able to continue providing this contribution while respecting the goals of the European Union is setting. A strong commitment has been recently undertaken by all the civil aviation through its Destination 2050 report to be net zero by 2050 through key measures that could achieve substantial CO2 emission reduction in line with EU climate goals. Changes in aircraft and rotorcraft technologies are just a part. It is crucial to provide public incentive for the development of sustainable aviation fuel, including e-fuel produced from renewable energy sources, improve infrastructure, air traffic control, and smart financing schemes, including an appropriate use of funding deriving from offsetting and emission trading scheme. It is clear that the contribution of the institution is as important as the one from the industry. The upcoming regulation on climate and sustainability need to be closely connected to the industrial strategy and the goal of the European Union will give itself in the concept of open strategic autonomy. To guarantee the European industry can fulfill the sustainability obligation while continuing to provide the strategic support that Europe needs, the institution must continue to work towards a better cooperation with the industry. Allocate funding in amounts fit for the ambitious goals that are being set up and that require massive investment from industry and institutions. Create conditions for an inclusive taxonomy to be a driver and not an obstacle to investment in aerospace and defense. Stakeholders need to be coherent in their priorities from research to procurement. And finally, discussion with the industry must be promoted on strategic goal and autonomy to foster the alignment of strategic priorities with market and competitiveness goals.
Thank you, Mr. Profumo. Maybe also turning on your other job, the CEO of Leonardo. So Leonardo is obviously also moving towards sustainability along an ambitious path. So what are the main barriers to overcome and the main factors to lead a sustainable transition at Leonardo?
First of all, I think that it's important to say that just last Friday, we have issued a revolving credit facility of 2.4 billion ESG related. So the financial system likes a lot our ESG model on which I'm incentivized. And so we have issued these two lines, 1.8 billion at 5 years and 600 million at 3 years, with another subscription of 200%, which do have a sort of bonus-malus system. So if we will achieve our target in terms of CO2 reduction, people management, mainly women in STEM position, and our position in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, we will receive a reduction of the spread we pay. So I think it's important to say, because the financial market is really supporting in pushing us in improving our activities, but as well we have a clear target on that. And this is mainly based on innovation and technologies. So for us, we think that as Leonardo, we are a strategic player in terms of the structural change which is going on in production and society, as we heard before, in terms of industry 3.0, 4.0, 5.0. For us, innovation is a key driver of sustainability. This is also the reason why sustainability is organizational with our Chief Technology and Innovation Officer in terms of responsibility. And digitalization is a key enabler for a green transition. So we have a very clear sustainability plan with a target related to the SDGs. We have a system in order to evaluate how our investments are working on the SDGs and supporting the achievement of the 19 SDGs. So we are really focused on that. Clearly, our technologies are, we think, are as well a key element in order to improve the green transition. For instance, space technologies, which are incredibly important, based on the digital evolution. So big data analytics are very important, as well as artificial intelligence for emergency management, precision agriculture, environmental monitoring and safety, or the support when there are natural disasters. We are also working in terms of research and development cycles, which are very long, being based on the digital technology, mainly with simulation, digital twin, and artificial intelligence. So, for instance, we have training systems which are completely based on simulation, so that we reduce dramatically the usage of fuel and as well the cost in order to produce our activities. But we are as well involved as Leonardo in sustainable mobility. There are important projects at the European level, like Clean Sky and CSR 2020, which are very important in terms of new platforms, but as well in terms of the air traffic management control. As well on urban air mobility, where the electric capability will become important. So that we are really focused on sustainability, as well as with our supply chain. We have 4,000 SMEs which work with us, and we are working with them on identifying specified targets for clean energy, greenhouse gas reduction, waste management, and so on and so forth. So we are not alone, but we work on our supply chain on these targets.
Thank you very much, Mr. Profumo. Now let's turn, last but not least, to Mr. Chapalapalli, Head of Tata Consultancy Services in Europe. And maybe a question to you, because you're an outside observer, if I may say. So you see multiple industries, and you're sort of looking and can compare. So what is the difference about TSC's vision for a more sustainable Europe, and how is the organization partnering with industry and policymakers to achieve this?
Thank you, Mr. Virgil, and it's a pleasure to join this, and I'm glad that I representing a technology company is part of this discussion. The way we have looked at sustainability, going through all of you, we have talked about ecology, we talked about talent, which is people, and then we are talking about technology and innovation. We have proposed a 5-point agenda, which is absolutely critical for European businesses and the policymakers to address. the center of that is upskilling the talent on digital skills. And that was one of the 5 key aspects that we are focused on and we are also propagating. Because as we were in the midst of a pandemic, we have literally been transported into the digital world. There is no transition. We are already in the digital world. And therefore, we have seen a significant reconfiguration on an urgent basis of supply chains, of talent, of manufacturing, of production. So today, we are in the midst of the digital world and everyone is catching up with that. And one of the key dimensions of that is how do we take our people along? People who are the youth, who are just getting into the workforce, people who are already part of the existing ecosystem of enterprises and society. And that is one of the priorities we are addressing. Apart from, of course, being a technology player, we are at the heart of transforming businesses into the new business models. How are we addressing that? For example, is at the primary and secondary schools, we need to get more and more people, more and more of our children tech savvy. And we have created programs by which we are enabling thousands of children to gain introduction to technology. We are going to universities and now engaging thousands of university students and getting them on board in Europe as well, from many countries, to train them on technology so that they can enhance the workforce. And finally, all the people who are already in the workforce and who need to make this transition, how do we enable that transition? As a company, we have more than 500,000 technology employees across the world. And we are very used to training and reskilling hundreds of thousands of people every year. And we're using these methods to allow our customers, who are all the large enterprises and the governments, to learn from this and enable this transition of people into this digital world. And I think the dimension of people is a very important aspect of sustainability. That's what we believe.
Thank you, Mr. Chapali. Maybe one final question and the request for a quick answer. In what ways can digital technology and innovation be key levers of sustainable development across the continent? I think you've already mentioned we've obviously all been thrown into digitalization because of the pandemic. What is next to come?
Now, when we look at Europe, I think the speed at which we innovate needs to be rapidly enhanced. And that speed is to transform business models into the digital world. All the large enterprises of Europe have put in a lot of effort in transforming their business models, but that pace needs to be much faster and it has to be enabled by technology. And it has to be not one company. Of course, we have talked a lot about ecosystems and platforms, and that kind of collaboration is going to be crucial. And of course, we have invested in building the innovation network and enabling our customers in Europe transition into the new business models and stay competitive in the global space by using technology and innovation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chapali, and thank you to all other panelists for their insights in their various industries and associations. And with that, I'm turning back to Jan for the closing moderation of this opening session. Thank you.
Thank you, Jens, and thank you to all the panelists. We are now moving to almost the final stage, and we have two distinguished leaders with us. It's Patrick Pouyanné and Ilham Kadri. Patrick, you are known as the chairman and CEO of Total Energy, and I think everybody has recognized the change in names and logo. But what people do not know that well is maybe the fact that you're also chairman of the Alliance pour l'Éducation and member of the board of l'Institut du Monde Arabe. And so that is pushing me for a question. Do these other assignments also help you to prepare Total Energy? Is it for the next generations? And is it also for the transformation of our ecosystems for a more just transition? Patrick, the floor is yours. And then we will have the honor to have Ilham with us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this introduction, and happy to join you today for this summit on sustainable development and just transition. Yes, for sure, to answer directly your question, it helps me, you know, being a chairman and CEO of such a large corporations as Total Energies. We are at the core of, I would say, also not only producing energy, but we are contributing to society as a whole, and being involved in some actions with young people through Alliance for Education or through Institut Monde Arabe is also, of course, a way to contribute more globally to the different stakeholders that Total is facing. I would say that, of course, for an energy company like Total Energies, we are at the heart of the challenge of the just transition. And I would say it's a twofold challenge that we have to tackle. Energy must be reinvented somewhere to respond to this existential threat posed by climate change and biodiversity erosion, while, of course, leaving no one behind. And this is a dual challenge that, to which we want to contribute as Total Energies. We're a multi-energy company with 100,000 employees in more 130 countries. Our company is really engaged in a transformation in which I can say that just transition is the core and driver. We proposed in May 21, very recently, this transformation, not only in our name, but also in our strategy to our shareholders through a resolution, which was proposed by the board. And the title of the resolution was on the company's ambition with respect to sustainable development and energy transition to carbon neutrality and its related targets by 2030. So that's clear that we've placed sustainability at the heart of this strategy and this transformation, in midst, of course, addressing the climate challenge, but also tackling the broader challenges associated with sustainable development, such as poverty, human rights, biodiversity loss, ethics. Just transition is the ability to take all these challenges all together with an integrated approach, and from our point of view, the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, provides a framework to do that. And it's why we are embarking the whole company from the management to the top to the bottom in a better appropriation of these SDGs and how the company must frame, I would say, some objectives and progress in these different directions, and not only on the climate change. Our commitment to a just transition is structured around 4 dimensions: the planet, sustainable and providing sustainable and affordable energy and environmental excellence, but also the people well-being for our employees, obviously, but people also with a shared prosperity with the communities with whom we work together. First contributing to a just transition means ensuring access to sustainable and affordable energy for a growing world population that legitimately aspires to higher quality of life. We set ourselves a clear ambition to get to net zero carbon emissions by 2050 together with society. But this must not come at the expense of access to affordable and reliable energy. Around 1 billion people worldwide lack access to modern forms of energy. And in Europe, more than 30 million people live in fuel poverty. Our commitment is to provide more energy with fewer emissions and in an always more responsible manner. This is what we could call the vertical dimension of sustainability. And to achieve that, we are investing massively, around 6 billion euros per year in new renewables and electricity capacities, as well in the gas value chain, as gas is a key way to massively decarbonize quickly power generation in Asia, while ensuring the reliability of power supply in combination with intermittent renewables. But on a more horizontal perspective, our company is deeply transforming. Some segments will grow and create new jobs, while others will have to adapt. Just transitions means leading this transformation with our people. And for instance, we are particularly attentive to skills adaptation for our employees. They need training to transition towards new jobs in renewables and electricity. And to support that, we have brought our 3,000 engineers and technicians and researchers together in a common entity called One Tech. We will ensure up to 5 days per year of knowledge acquisition for an energy new to the employees' competencies. This will offer career opportunities in new energies to all employees. We conduct as well the conversion of our industrial sites as part of a strategy to get to net zero, with the greatest attention to the potential social impacts. For instance, we are converting the Grand Puy oil refinery in France into a zero carbon platform with a biorefinery, while preserving jobs, providing each employee with an appropriate solution, and supporting each of our partner companies during the industrial repurposing. We are, of course, working on mapping existing skills and upskilling, reskilling to meet new needs combined with select recruitment of new skills. But this business transformation requires more, I would say, that only individual company efforts. Will not succeed without innovative, impact-oriented collaboration throughout our ecosystems. We collectively have a huge and urgent challenge ahead, and the key to solve the complex and interconnected issues we are facing is a collaboration of all stakeholders, businesses, governments, civil society, financial communities, consumers, industrial federations. The CEO's call to action, initiated last year in 2019 by CSR Europe, that I signed together with 380 CEOs, reaffirmed our conviction that cooperation is one of our greatest assets on the path to sustainability. As advocated by the European Pact for Sustainable Industry, industry federations can be one of the places fostering these collective actions towards sustainability. They have a role to play to mainstream sustainable business models. This is particularly true for European Federation. Europe is at the forefront of the energy transition, and it's an opportunity for us European companies because it obliges us to move faster. TotalEnergies is determined to play its part alongside its peers and European institutions to fully contribute to the success of the Green Deal. As member of many industry associations, we act in various ways to carry the discussion on sustainability in these forums. And for instance, we clearly stand for our values and commitments. We regularly check that the organization we belong to all positions align with our own, especially on climate. When they are not fully aligned, our line is clear. First, advocate internally for change. If non-alignment persists, take the decision to leave. But also to be a proactive force. For example, in 2020, within Eurogas, we brought on a discussion for joining the methane guiding principles that Eurogas Board of Directors decided to join at unanimity. And we continue to act like that wherever we can. I think the future of Federation is to increasingly take on this sustainability role, starting with defining, for example, a common vision of the first sector's collective contribution to the SDGs. Another key lever to transform ecosystem for just transition I'd like to highlight is the necessity to involve the whole value chains. One example about supply chains. We have a key role to play to accompany our suppliers to collectively raise the playing field. And for instance, we've developed with some peers, BP, Equinor, and Shell, a common collaborative platforms to assess respect for human rights by our suppliers, and thus promote improvement in working conditions across the supply chain in our industry. Achieving a just transition is indeed the greatest collective challenge. Europe has a key role to play, but let's not forget this is a global challenge. And it becomes more and more crucial to efficiently bring the discussion on just transition to the global level. Otherwise, the major risk is to see the world divided into two parts. The OECD countries, the rich countries on one side that will strive for net zero in 2050, and the others, the emerging countries, that need affordable energy because their priority is to lift people out of poverty. And how do we accompany these countries? The Paris Agreement stipulates that rich countries shall provide financial resources to assist developing countries in their transition. The commitment was $100 billion per year, but we are a long way off for the moment. It will be certainly one of the major stakes and debates at COP26 soon in Glasgow. But it is absolutely key to ensure an inclusive, just transition and to succeed on the climate change challenge. As a conclusion, I would like to say that we, women and men in Total Energies, have really the ambition, the strategy to play our full part in this just transition. You can count on our full engagement to deliver, and we will convince by proof.
Thank you, Patrick, very much for this explanation and this radical change that we witness within Total becoming Total Energy. Thank you very much for that. And now we have the pleasure to have Ilham Kadri. Ilham, you are known as the CEO of Solvay. You're also Vice President of the CIFIC, the Industry Federation in Europe on Chemistry. And you have numerous functions in the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, also at the ERT. And I'm very proud to say also you accept to be chair of the advisory board of CSR Europe. And that was a complete normal step. After the many years of already engaging with CSR Europe, you were the ambassador to unite these 380 CEOs, which Frans Starach and Patrick have been referring to. And that led to a big action, which is the Pact for Sustainable Industry. If I quickly look at what we have received today, Patrick was clear, energy, but I think all industry must be reinvented. And you are the mother of all industry, so chemistry has even a more special role to play there. Etienne Davignon mentioned it's not about only a Green Deal, it's also a social deal. Céline saying it's about not only to preserve, but to regenerate natural capital. Sharon saying transparency is a must, including tax transparency. Frans Timmermans was key about it's supporting youth to take over. And many of you were saying it's sector and cross-sector collaborations. And Laurent Dartout was mentioning the example of how Bridgestone and Solvay were starting to work together. And finally, the barometer presented by Jens was showing that there is still a big fragmentation in all industry federations between champions and laggards. So how, like Alessandro or Patrick, how to reinforce the capacity of the federations to be not only lobbyists, but also to be networks that can empower the new deals, I would say, the new collaborations within the sectors and through the cross-sector perspective. So with all of that, we have a chance to have you as a kind of crescendo for this first plenary session. How is it that you are giving equal ambition, not only to climate, environment, but also to social and to the risk of inequalities? And how are you bringing that through your value chains? Ilham.
Thank you very much, Jan, for your kind introduction. And it's great to be with you again, to be with Monsieur Davignon here again for the third time. Thank you for your leadership. It's very inspiring for all of us. As you know, Jan, in 2019, you may remember, I was standing in front of this plenary to launch the CEO call for action on behalf of more than 300 leaders Patrick talked about that were ready to address climate, sustainable prosperity and inclusive growth in line with the United Nations SDGs. So a few years after, and we went through the COVID-19 unprecedented lifetime crisis. Meanwhile, where did this call for action lead us in 2021? We have seen, in fact, and it was talked about, the extra financial progress discussed as an integral part of the European semesters. We're also working with the WEF and the IBC to standardize, harmonize some. Patrick is also part of the council to standardize some non-financial KPIs. It's important. Companies have joined forces to seek for positive and significant impact through industry federations. And as you said, I can testify that the CIFIC board is taking this very, very seriously. We are launching today the SDG barometer together with Moody's Vigeo Iris, a much larger, broader report on ESG performance than what we had previously. This is good. I mean, if we have one language, harmonized language, we will compare apples and apples. And this is what we want as industry, leaders. And as much as I am proud of these positive developments, Jan, I'm also fully conscious that we need to accelerate our efforts. On the just transition, more specifically, which is about securing workers' rights and livelihoods, when shifting to sustainable production, we need to put inclusion at the heart of the EU Green Deal. There will be, in my mind, no just transition with a focus only on environmental issues, and no one should be left behind, as it was said many times during the morning session. The Green Deal will only succeed if it has credibility among all stakeholders. We see, in fact, the critical importance of equity, inclusion through this year barometer. The WBCSD work on inequality, and I'm proud to be part of, stipulates that the most vulnerable ones are more than ever endangered by a world in a transition. So as business leader, I believe we need to find the right balance, obviously, between competitiveness, innovation, and equality. And it's those 3 Ps, right? The planet, profits, and people approach we need to all embrace. The SDG barometer highlights the strong fragmentation, and it was told this morning, between leaders and laggers across European sectors on ESG matters. This is not about pointing fingers, it's about, understanding what the great looks like, and frankly, learn from each other how we can raise the bars. Leaders that take actions have a duty to embark the laggers. It's not 10% of companies committing to a just transition that we want to see, but a whole industry shifts. And the mindset, as Frans Timmermans said, it's a make it happen mindset that we all need to adopt if you want to leave a safer, equal, sustainable, profitable world to our kids. While there is a huge cost to this transformation, we all know that, let's not hide ourselves, there is also a very high risk not to move, in fact, not to move fast enough. So investment, including private, public, and the EU has been leading the way, have to be directed and supported to encourage sustainable technologies and invest at the same time in an inclusive society within a fair trade framework, and that's the role of authorities. So to put it in simple words, on a dead planet, there will be no life and no jobs. And on a prosperous green planet with no justice and equality, there will be a lot of people left behind. So we need the AND, the AND, and we need all to work constructively to balance acts and priorities. We cannot do it overnight. Leaving, in my mind, nobody behind is a must to do in a world with increasing natural disasters, as we have experienced, and unprecedented pandemics exacerbating injustice. So how do we go from here? I believe we need to raise awareness. It's pedagogy, it's education, it's constructive dialogue with the entire ecosystem on how we can achieve this just transition for all. And just like, the environment transition, in the just transition, there is the word transition. Huh? It's a process we are all in, and by working together, we'll go again faster and further. So let me give you an example from my company, right? At Solvay, we have embraced that transition. We launched our Solvay One Planet last year. We walked the talk on the just transition with many initiatives centered around people, and it's just the beginning. We are proud, for example, to have signed the global agreements with Industry All. For those who do not know them, a global union federation, which represents more than 50 million working people worldwide. And this agreement simply guarantees the same minimum working conditions and rights to all of the group's employees, regardless of their geographic location or background, of course. And to this end, we offer a global social protection net that we call Solvay Care to all employees, including extending the minimum, for example, parental leave for all co-parents to 16 weeks, regardless of their sexual orientation. Another beautiful example of leaving no one behind is the Solvay Solidarity Fund that we created last year. Last year has been a stress test and to all of us, right? And this fund provides assistance to employees and their families. It started with the management team cutting their salaries last year by 15%, and shareholders cutting their dividend to participate into the fund. And in just 6 weeks, we raised 15 million euros and supported more than 2,000 families in hardship and communities, around us. And this was a massive initiative for our industry during this crisis. Another example I love to mention is Solvay empowers more than 7,000 guar farmers in Rajasthan in India, of which about 1/4 are women. I think it was mentioned today that vulnerability of women, which is close to my heart, is something which we see now, deteriorating. And we help them to cultivate guar beans that go into your bio shampoo with tools and knowledge to cultivate their crops with climate smart agricultural practices. And as we speak, believe it or not, we are building a digital blockchain to allow them access to a financial identity and therefore live their life with freedom and pride. We also launched what we call Citizen Day to raise awareness of our employees and our local communities on important themes. 2019 was environment, last year was education. So we met the kids and we tried to bring more girls into the STEM, science, technology, engineering and math curriculum. And this year is about biodiversity. Now, one last point, which is very close to my heart. We launched our diversity, equity and inclusion roadmap. In May this year, we call it Solving One Dignity. I'm a pure product of diversity and inclusion, and I'm sitting in front of you. And in my mind, it's not about only diversity, but it's placing human dignity back at the heart of our activities and interaction. We made as a company ambitious commitment to improve by 2025, whether it's diversity of gender, handicap, visible or not, thoughts, religion, origin, sexual orientation. And inclusion, in fact, is at the center of this program. Without inclusive workplaces, without equality, we won't attract and retain diversity. Remember, diversity is what you see, and inclusion, equality is what you do. Our roadmap also highlights that we will assess if there are undesired pay gaps, and we will close them, if any. There are just here a few tangible examples of how we can play our part in leaving nobody behind. Others have talked about upskilling, reskilling. It's so important in a digital world, and we are manufacturing companies who are also doing that. We are in the middle of a massive transition. We all recognize that, where we must not lose sight of the consequences for vulnerable population. And this summit is a good reminder that we are not there yet. We are the very last generation that has the luxury to make a choice and take the right decisions for the planet, also for our profit, and certainly for our people. So with that, thank you very much for having me, and back to you.
Thank you very much, Ilham, and thank you to all of you for also that energy, not only the words, but also the energy that are behind, not only the commitments, but the actions. I would like, of course, before giving the floor to Etienne Davignon, thank many of the colleagues here internally that have made this summit possible, especially also this first high-level plenary. Thank you to all the teams, of course, which is our platform. Thank you, Jens, for the moderation, and especially for the barometer that is indeed, as Ilham is saying, offering us a same language, and that is extremely much welcome. Etienne Davignon, if I can turn the floor to you for the final words. Thank you so much.
Well, I believe we were all interested and quite fascinated by the extent of the task ahead of us. I think what is really interesting also was in the barometer is to find out that if everybody was concerned, there is still a lot of practical implementation to be done. And it's going to be a risky task ahead, because inequality will become part of the concerns. Not only what happens to the climate, but what happens to the people, not only related to the climate, but to their own situation. So there'll be a lot of work to be done. I think I go away from this meeting highly confident that the action and the trans-business dialogue will lead us to that, and thank everybody and keep at it. That is really what we have to do, keep at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Etienne. Thank you to all, and do not miss also the rest of the program. It's a wonderful buffet. We have other sessions going on today and also for the next days to come. Happy to say also that Commissioners McGuinness, Didier Reinders, and also Mr. Schmidt, together with other Director Generals of the Commission, will explain more about this new generation of rules which the European Union is preparing. Thank you so much and have a good lunch and a good afternoon.